The lights of the studio were glaring, the audience buzzing with anticipation, and the cameras rolling in high definition for millions of viewers across the globe. Meghan Markle had taken her seat, poised and polished, prepared to deliver yet another controlled narrative about her life beyond the palace walls. But what she didn't anticipate was that Kinsey Schofield, the unapologetic royal commentator known for her sharp tongue and relentless pursuit of truth, would be seated across from her, ready to dismantle the glossy facade piece by piece. From the moment the interview began, the tension was unmistakable. Meghan leaned into her well-worn narrative of victimhood, carefully choosing words that painted herself as a misunderstood outsider who had been unfairly vilified by both the monarchy and the media. She invoked the familiar storylines, how she had struggled with palace traditions, how her voice was silenced, how the press twisted her every word. It was a tale her supporters had heard countless times before, polished, emotional, and seemingly bulletproof. But then, with a sharp and deliberate interjection, Kinsey Schofield dropped the first bombshell. She questioned the very foundation of Meghan's story, the infamous Netflix series that Harry and Meghan had touted as their truth. With a calm but cutting tone, Schofield asked, "If your Netflix series was about telling your authentic story, why do so many documented inconsistencies keep surfacing? Inconsistencies that paint an entirely different picture." The studio went silent. Meghan's practiced smile faltered. For a brief moment, the controlled image slipped, and the audience caught a glimpse of the unfiltered reality behind the curated brand. This was no ordinary interview. This was a confrontation. As the conversation deepened, Kinsey Schofield methodically began exposing example after example discrepancies. She pointed to timelines that didn't align, statements that contradicted past interviews, and claims that had been openly refuted by palace insiders. One by one, she unraveled the carefully spun web, holding Meghan accountable in real time. The tension was palpable, the stakes enormous. Meghan had built an empire on her version of events, but Kinsey was tearing through it with the precision of a surgeon. The audience reacted audibly. Gasps, whispers, and even uncomfortable laughter rippled across the studio. For years, critics had accused Meghan of manipulating narratives to her advantage, but rarely had she been so directly challenged in a live setting with nowhere to hide. Kinsey, unfazed by the Duchess's icy glare, pressed on, forcing Meghan to confront the contradictions that had long haunted her public image. What made the exchange even more shocking was the timing. Just as Meghan had been preparing to launch her next big media project, the Netflix lies were resurfacing at the worst possible moment. Old clips from the series were circulating online, with fact-checkers and royal biographers dissecting them in excruciating detail. Social media was ablaze with side-by-side comparisons, Meghan's words versus reality, and the gaps were glaring. Kinsey Schofield, armed with these very receipts, didn't merely expose Meghan in theory. She exposed her with cold, undeniable evidence. Every time Meghan attempted to pivot, Kinsey would cut in with another inconvenient fact, pulling the conversation back to the heart of the issue. It was brutal, it was raw, and it was happening in front of millions. As the interview spiraled, Meghan's composure cracked. Her responses grew defensive, her tone sharper, her body language tense. What began as another opportunity to push her narrative had transformed into a live spectacle of exposure, humiliation, and accountability. The Duchess of Sussex, accustomed to controlling the narrative, was suddenly on the defensive, cornered by a commentator who refused to let her slip away unscathed. Meanwhile, social media exploded. Clips from the exchange went viral within minutes. Hashtags like Meghan exposed, Netflix lies, and Kinsey versus Meghan dominating global trends. Viewers hailed Kinsey as the only voice bold enough to say what others had tiptoed around for years. Commentators declared the most explosive royal confrontation since Diana's Panorama interview. Except this time, the cracks were appearing not in the monarchy, but in Meghan's credibility. By the end of the segment, Meghan was visibly shaken, her trademark poise replaced with strained, defensive demeanor. Kinsey, meanwhile, remained calm, collected, and unflinching, delivering her closing remarks with a quiet authority that underscored the magnitude of what had just unfolded. This wasn't just a diva clash. It was a public reckoning. But the drama didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Behind the scenes, Meghan was said to be furious. demanding explanations from producers and vowing never to appear on a stage where she could be blindsided again. Kinsey, on the other hand, walked away vindicated. A woman who had dared confront the Duchess of Sussex and had walked out with her reputation intact, perhaps even elevated. The storm that erupted in the studio did not end when the credits rolled. Instead, it spilled into headlines worldwide, dominating news cycles for days on end. Within hours, media outlets from London to Los Angeles carried the story. Kinsey Schofield exposes Meghan Markle. Netflix lives resurface in live show clash. The framing was merciless, and the global narrative was clear. Meghan had been cornered, and the evidence was impossible to ignore. For Meghan, who had built her post-royal brand on controlling the story, the timing was catastrophic. She and Harry had been preparing to pitch new projects, documentaries, podcasts, even whispers of a scripted Netflix drama about their lives. But now, investors and streaming executives were reportedly scrambling, questioning whether the Sussexes still had the credibility to deliver. Kinsey's public takedown had reawakened doubts that many in Hollywood already harbored but had been too polite or too cautious to voice. Across the Atlantic, the royal family remained silent, as they always do. But insiders close to Buckingham Palace suggested a very different mood behind closed doors. According to sources, aides were delighted to see Meghan publicly challenged in a way they themselves never could. The phrase "she dug her own hole" circulated quietly among courtiers, and whispers suggested that senior royals, particularly Prince William, saw this as vindication for years of accusations they had endured. Prince Harry, however, was not silent. Reports emerged that he was fuming over the incident, lashing out privately at producers, accusing them of staging a setup to humiliate Meghan. To him, it wasn't just about a talk show clash. It was yet another example of the world failing to protect his wife. But insiders revealed another side to the story. Tension between Harry and Meghan was reportedly intensifying behind the scenes. Harry had stood by Meghan's narratives unwaveringly for years, defending her account against all criticism. But now, with Kinsey's pointed receipts and the avalanche of fact-checking online, Harry himself was being forced to reckon with contradictions. Friends close to him revealed that he was deeply conflicted, torn between loyalty to Meghan and a gnawing recognition that the cracks in their stories were becoming undeniable. Meanwhile, Hollywood's reaction was particularly brutal. The entertainment industry thrives on image, and Meghan's brand had been built on the allure of glamour, resilience, and authenticity. But authenticity, once questioned, can crumble overnight. Executives whispered that Meghan and Harry had overplayed their hand, monetizing their grievances while presenting themselves as victims. The public has sympathy for hardship, one insider explained, but they have no patience for hypocrisy. Social media, always the unforgiving judge, amplified the fallout to seismic levels. Memes mocking Meghan's faltering responses to Kinsey's questions spread across TikTok and Instagram. On Twitter, hashtags like Meghan Exposed and Netflix Lives refused to die down, trending for over a week. Even Meghan's most loyal fans found themselves on the defensive, scrambling to explain away the discrepancies. And then came the ripple effect. Past associates, journalists, and even a strange friend began to step forward, emboldened by the moment. Some resurfaced old interviews where Meghan's words clashed with her Netflix narrative. Others leaked messages and anecdotes that painted a far less flattering picture of the Duchess's Hollywood rise and her calculated pursuit of royal status. It was as if the dam had broken, and the world was finally ready to challenge the story Meghan had so carefully crafted. But the most shocking blow came not from Hollywood or the media, but from within Meghan's own circle. Former staffers, long silenced by NDAs and fear of backlash, reportedly began quietly reaching out to journalists, hinting that they too had truths to share. Kinsey's confrontation, it seemed, had opened the floodgates.